Hey guys, this is SunsFan, and welcome to the Dota Cinema Guide to Pangolier. This was written and approved by our good friend Dota 2 Bowie and our resident Pangolier expert luki. Their social medias can be found in the description of the video. Dota 2 Bowie has a great YouTube channel for more in-depth analysis, and luki has an amazing Twitch stream where he basically just spams Pango and is currently ranked as a top 10 immortal. This guide is updated for patch 7.24. Keep in mind that as updates come out, some of this information could change, although it's most likely going to stay highly relevant. Pangolier is a unique hero because of two of his abilities. His ultimate Rolling Thunder can deal a lot of damage and offers some serious control, but its effectiveness can sometimes be based off of where you are on the map. Swashbuckle, on the other hand, which is his first ability, is an amazing spell for wave clear, farming, escaping, and initiation. He, of course, has other special aspects, including the fact that he has a turn rate of 1, which essentially means he's very quick to change directions, which can be very important given his skill set. Pango might seem like a challenging hero, and he does have an initial learning curve, but boy is he fun. He fights extremely well, farms like a boss, and he can build a really wide pool of items, all while fitting in a lot of roles into the game. He can be played in almost any position, but generally we recommend that you try him playing as a 2 or a 3. I do think that position 2 is much better since offlane Pangolier is a bit greedy, but both can technically work depending on the game. Pango's pretty good at laning because he has a really low cooldown on Swashbuckle, which can both harass and secure range creeps, which of course will provide more experience. He doesn't have a lot of kill potential prior to level 5, but against players that don't know how to get out of the range when Swashbuckle comes, you might be able to take them out if your support have the proper resources. Having said that, there's a long list of little tricks that can improve your game and damage potential, not only for lane kills, but for team fights in general. Let's start with the ones involving Swashbuckle. When running away, many players tend to panic Swashbuckle, which usually means they'll Swashbuckle with the damage facing the way they're moving. But more often than not, you want to do the opposite. When you Swashbuckle towards the opposite side, you might cancel blinks, you might slow enemies, or you might just reduce their armor, meaning their dive can get riskier as a result. This is something you should practice for that good old muscle memory. You want to do things like that on instinct. When you're playing aggressively, and you're absolutely sure that there's no heroes waiting for you, and the kill is safe, you want to Swashbuckle while crossing the enemy hero. This is good for two reasons. When you cross an enemy model while swashbuckling, you get an extra instance of damage for whatever reason, so that ends up just being free. This also gives you a higher chance of proccing your passive, and at the same time you can block their path while you attack them, meaning you use the slow much more efficiently if you do proc the lucky shot. Remember that for Swashbuckle you can cross cliffs to increase your efficiency, and when you don't want to fight, it can also be used to embed yourself in cliffs for sneaky TPs when the enemy has no vision. And when it comes to Rolling Thunder, there's a lot of tricks out there, but I think many players confuse these with things that you actually need to do every game. I'll just mention the ones that I really think are worth your time. Number 1, fighting in good areas with Rolling Thunder. I'm pretty sure you guys have seen this BSJ clip. Not to pick on my boy, but this is exactly what we don't want happening. You want to fight in areas where you have multiple walls or hitboxes that you can bounce off of in order to constantly control the enemy. This is not really a trick, but sometimes a lot of Pango players underrate it, and it's honestly more important than any trick you've probably ever seen, especially if you haven't mastered this yet. Number 2, this is a burst technique that might seem small, but it's a convenient way to trick people holding on to mechs and pipes. When you're using Rolling Thunder and you want to burst someone, all you can do after rolling through them is shield crash, and as you're in the air, swashbuckle towards the targets you want to burst, which ends up of course canceling your ultimate. This saves you the cast time of Rolling Thunder while also applying the damage reduction as you end the ult, meaning you're really going to be tanky even though you've exited the ball. And number 3, you can extend the duration of Rolling Thunder by using shield crash as it's about to end. This means you can stun people for longer in fights when you're actually benefiting from maintaining the ult through the whole duration. For skills, you always want to max Swashbuckle since it's your wave clear, escape, and damage, and you usually only want to get shield crash after level 8. The reason for this is your passive scales with your Q, and shield crash, although quite good, just costs too much mana considering your mana pool early on. You're usually rushing Javelin and Wand, so you can't really afford shield crash. One of the few exceptions though is if you're going against a Meepo, but even against that hero, the disarm and minus armor are really good. After maxing Swashbuckle, you learn all but 1 point in the passive, so you can get shield crash at 9 and mana regen talent at 10. Then you only get the last point of the passive after maxing shield crash and getting the level 15 talent, which is of course the cooldown reduction of shield crash during ulti. In general, if you're playing a greedy damage-based Pango, which is my personal favorite, the Swashbuckle damage at 20 is better. But against heroes that can hurt you during Rolling Thunder like Sniper, Clinks, and Drow Ranger, the strength can be useful. It's also a good option if you go for the Aura style with Crimson, Pipe, and Teamfight items. In general though, the damage is just more useful, especially if you get Ags, which you should. For the 25 talent, while the rolling cooldown reduction does seem amazing on paper, you have to account for a couple things. Not only do you run into mana issues, especially if you're going for the Diffusal, Maelstrom, and damage items, but with those items you're actually reducing your damage output, since you can't swashbuckle while you ult. So all in all, take the swashbuckle cooldown reduction talent as it provides you more mobility, more disarm, and more damage. Looking back, an easy way to remember the talent tree is just stick to the right side for most purposes. Your initial item build is Quelling, Blade, and stats of some kind. And depending on whether you're going mid or off lane, you'll have to just adjust for regen items with less stats, but of course, you can't go wrong with branches to build Wand, which is absolutely a core item for you. Luki himself goes with the starting build of Triple Branch, Fairy Fire, and Quelling Blade, so he can rush a fast bottle. Speaking of bottle, it's pretty crucial on mid Pango since you can use Swashbuckle to not only push the lane, but also arrive at the room before your opponent. Rushing that before Javelin is pretty crucial, but don't get me wrong, Javelin still needs to come out super fast, as it can be a true difference maker for you to accelerate your farm and provide kill potential. For offlane, you can ignore bottle in most cases and just aim for your Javelin, unless you're in a lane that forces you to get boots early. Heroes like Ursa and Jug will typically be the ones to force your hand. Surprisingly, a lot of players still go for Arcane Boots or just Brown Boots on Pango, when Treads is honestly amazing for you. The Strength Swap allows you to dive for kills and survive, the Int Treads allows you to get a ton of extra spells, and the Agi Toggle allows you to get more damage and right clicks off after the slow. It can be a little annoying to toggle, I know, but without a doubt it is the best boots option for this bad boy. That said, if you're not interested in tread toggling, which I can respect, then go for Arcane, since you'll just be wasting a lot of potential of the item. After these items though, your possibilities with Pango are endless. The item build is divided on whether you're going for the DPS build or tankiness. And honestly, for the most part, if you didn't feed 3 times in lane, then the damage build is probably the better one. Plus with damage items, this hero becomes arguably the most fun hero in the entire game. Which then leads us to, of course, Maelstrom, which should be your first main item. Once this is picked up, even if you've had a bit of a rough start, the game just gets easier. You'll be able to swashbuckle down waves constantly, and as a result, will be able to outfarm most, if not all, the heroes on the map. Diffusal Blade is usually next on the list. This not only gives you a nice slow, which, by the way, you should make a habit of using when you're in ulti form, but also just gives you a ton of damage and mana burn. Remember, you're proccing the mana burn with each instance of the swashbuckle. While Basher is a good item, I don't recommend getting it third. There are some games where it makes sense though. It can be really good against the Jugs and Lifestealers of the world that rely on magic immunity to split push, and it can also be great versus heroes that rely on early BKBs to fight like Enigma and Gyrocopter. But Aghanim Scepter is just plain disgusting. If you have a Maelstrom Diffusal, then Ag should almost always be your next choice. By this time, you should be able to sustain yourself mana-wise, whether it be via Clarities or neutral items, which we'll get to soon. But as long as you're at level 15 and have Ags, you will be a force to reckon with. If the game continues past this point, then Basher into Abyssal can be amazing. Keep in mind though that Basher does have a cooldown, so your swash will only proc once, but you're almost guaranteed a bash because of how many times you attack. But in games you're not free to fight, then BKB or Eul's Scepter can become really good options against roots and silences. In general, if you're having a truly bad time, then Eul's is the cheapest way to live. And then into the late game, if you really want to destroy people with a damage build and assuming the game actually goes long enough, you can consider an MKB and Satanic. There are certain situations in the game when you're just out of slots, but it might feel okay to eat your Ag Scepter and just hold a casual Morbid Mask. That thing can be super value when you do a ton of damage. Just keep in mind that mana can definitely be an issue when you go for more damage, so just play it smart and hold some Clarities. But if you're going for the utility build, then every game will be different, and there's a ton of items you can go for. Greaves can be a great option for teamfight comps, especially if you don't feel forced into an early Eul's, but there's also Pipe, Crimson, and Blink if you lack initiation. It's really hard to explain a utility Pango since it'll just be based on the game you're playing and how you feel. Usually going utility means you're in the off lane since this hero just takes a lot of space in the map, and as an offlaner, your job is to create space for your position 1 or 2. Some other situational items for either role can include the likes of Lotus Orb for dispelling roots and silences, and Aeon Disc if you're getting bursted. Now we're going to try something a little different, so let us know if you like it. I'm going to list some neutral items that are very good for Pango based on the tier. For tier 1, Faded Brooch is by far the best. It gives you a nice boost of mana and movement speed, which are both really important on this hero. Keen Optic, Arcane Ring, and Royal Jelly are also solid, mostly for the mana that they can provide. For tier 2, there are a lot of great ones. Ring of Aquila and Essence Ring are there for the mana regen. Nether Shell is also terrific for the spell damage and big boost to magic resist. And of course there's Clumsy Net, which can be used during your ultimate to basically ensure you're perma-stunning someone, similar to what Yules will provide. Although now with recent changes, you won't be able to do this on magic immune enemies, so it's not quite as good as before. And then my personal favorite has to be Vampire Fangs. It gives you lifesteal for both your spells and right clicks, which essentially stacks up to work for Swashbuckle. There are many games where I just keep this item the entire game. For tier 3, Quickening Charm is great, and Paladin Sword is okay for the same reasons as stated on Vampire Fangs. Also, Orb of Destruction stacks with your Swash, and provides more slow, which is obviously a good thing. Spider Legs is an item people always mention, but I think it's a bit overrated and can really mess with your ult. And then there's Mindbreaker, which is kind of incredible when you think about it. The silence will obviously proc on your Swashbuckle, but remember it also provides 25 magic attack bonus damage, which works on each instance of your Swash. That additional damage can be huge. For tier 4, Spell Prism gives you a Quickening Charm type effect on Crack, not to mention of course the extra stats and mana regen, and then the rest of the items are a bit situational. Minotaur Horn can make you a bit tankier and give you that short BKB, Flicker can be really cool to dispel a silence of some sort, and Timeless Relic will give you a bit more spell damage and provide you with longer duration lucky shots. And then the Grandmaster tier 5 items, you have Mirror Shield, which gives you great defensive capabilities, as well as stats, and of course Fallen Sky, which can be comboed with your ultimate quite nicely. Pangolier usually suffers against heroes that can easily burst him down before he ults, or that can damage him in his ult. Two of the most iconic heroes are Clinks and Bloodseeker. Clinks has a damage spell that Pangolier has no response against, and Bloodseeker completely nullifies your ult and is just a pain in the goddamn ass to play against. We didn't mention that in the items section, but Linken's is pretty much core versus Bloodseeker. Other examples of heroes that really hurt you are Bane and Wyvern with their BKB piercing ultimates, and then of course silences like Riki, Sky, and Nightstalker. Also, any kind of roots can be pretty annoying, so Treant Protector and Underlord can be a nuisance. But again, I can't stress this enough, everything feels pretty playable as a Pango, unless you face a Bloodseeker, which is the only hero that forces you to play completely different. For friends, Pango usually works in almost any draft as he's quite dynamic, but there's always a few heroes that work really well with him. Any burst damage heroes with high mobility like Storm, TA, Lifestealer, and Ursa make great use of your Rolling Thunder. Great control like Bane, Nyx, and Magnus also work wonders. And lastly, any initiators are great to pair with Pango, especially if you go for the damage build, as you typically don't want to be the first one in every time. Thanks for watching, guys, and be sure to subscribe to the Dota Cinema channel for more guides to come. Thanks again to Dota2 Bowie and Luki for all their help. Let us know if you have any suggestions in the comments and tell us who you'd like to see a guide on next. Till next time, this is Sunsfan, signing out.